Okay. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. This will be recorded later for archival purposes and also for other future prospective students to look at what UX design might look like within the Purdue Polytechnic Institute. Tonight we have a set of UX faculty within the Computer Graphics Technology Department and also 3 current students in the UX design program. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a minute. There are a number of ways that you can participate tonight. There is a live chat that we are monitoring, and we're happy to answer any questions that show up in that chat, either through a chat message or as a prompt for a question for our students and faculty to answer for you. You're also welcome to email any questions to uxdesign@purdue.edu, and that will allow you to ask a more specific question that we might either follow up via email later on or pass on to people that can get the answers, or to serve as a conversation point for us tonight. My name is Colin Gray, and I am the UX Design Program Lead. I lead our undergraduate major and graduate concentration in UX, and I will be moderating our conversation tonight. I'll let each individual here introduce themselves so you can get to know who we are a little bit better.
Hi, I'm Austin Toombs, and I'm also one of the faculty, and I teach. Do you want to talk about, should we talk about which studios we teach, or should
Not
we
yet.
wait? Okay,
Let's wait on that.
we'll move on to the students then.
All right, my name is Will Kaufman. I am a sophomore at Purdue, but it's my first year in the UX design program. And I guess something that drew me to the program was a couple things actually. It was the close-knit community that I discovered through joining some of the opportunities that UX design provides you, as well as just really having an interest in understanding how people think when using technology.
Hi, I'm Ria. I'm in the 3rd year of the UX program here. And what drew me to the program was I was really interested in being involved in technology from being exposed to it at a young age, but I wanted to take a kind of a more creative and problem-solving approach to my future career.
My name is Adam Kaufman. I'm his twin. So yeah, we're the same age. I am a sophomore here at Purdue, freshman in the program. And one thing that drew me to UX was I've grown up as a tech-savvy individual, always been interested in creating things, designing things, using my imagination. So when I found the UX Design Club and began networking with some of the faculty and students, it really grew my interest in the program.
Okay, excellent. So we have a great group to discuss any questions that you might have tonight. Fortunately, we brought a number of questions of our own to help stimulate the conversation and maybe answer some of the questions that might be on your brain without you even knowing it yet. So I'm going to kick off by asking the students about their experience coming to UX, because for a number of students, it's not the first thing that they do when they arrive on campus. They might have taken different paths through high school and early in their college career to UX. So maybe talk a little bit more about your path to UX, what you felt like you were able to accomplish in UX that you were perhaps maybe not able to through other paths.
Okay, well, I guess I can start. Just going to preface this by saying my path and Adam's path are very similar, so you may hear some duplicates, but probably different than Rita's. So I actually started in exploratory studies. I came to Purdue not quite knowing what I wanted to pursue. Over the summer before coming here, I had been basically looking through all the majors at Purdue, and I found UX design, but I kind of put that off to the side because I didn't really know quite what it was. But when I came to Purdue and I spent a little bit of time in exploratory studies, I'd been hearing more and more about the major and decided to look more into it. So I went online and found out that the UX Design Club actually had a call out the following day, so it was very timely. I went to the call out, networked and just met a lot of the students, a lot of the faculty, and became more interested in UX. So starting in exploratory studies, kind of traversing through there and eventually finding UX through talking to individuals, just word of mouth, researching different majors is kind of how I found UX. But it wasn't until I went to the club and started talking to people that I learned a lot more about it and eventually became more interested.
So I actually had more of a traditional route. When I applied to Purdue, I actually applied as a UX design major. All of the other schools, I applied computer science, but I couldn't help but look over the curriculum every day, and I was like, it would be so great to just take these classes and go to these. And once I actually was on campus and taking the classes, that expectation became a reality. I was so excited to go to class every day and talk about all things design, all the theory, and actually practice it within class. Compared to my other computer science class I had, I used to always dread going to that right after my UX class, and it's been just a fabulous experience since then.
Yeah, so my high school experience is very different than college. In high school, I took a lot of engineering, well, a couple like intro to engineering classes, and I really liked building things hands-on, working with groups, just exercising my creativity. And I thought I was going to go into college doing something maybe sciencey. I'm at Purdue, but I'm not doing anything engineering, which is kind of, I don't know. Purdue is very engineering oriented, so it felt a little weird not going that route or going anything close to that. But I ended up in UX, and I'm very happy. As Will said, we were kind of first exposed to UX through the call out, and due to the fact that we transferred into the program last spring, we had to wait an entire summer and then an extra semester to actually begin UX this spring. So it was definitely something big for me, a weight that I was I don't know, I was struggling through it because it was just a long wait.
Yeah, you're so excited.
Anyways,
We're glad we're at the other end, though.
Yes.
And this brings up an interesting point, that our program is quite unique nationally and internationally. And a lot of students find the program through non-traditional means. So some, like Rhea, were lucky enough to figure this out in high school and were able to admit directly into this program. If you're listening, you're probably in that boat because you have applied and you've been accepted into UX design. About 2/3 of our students come through that route where they apply directly into UX. They know for some reason that it's a good fit for them. But for about 1/3 of all of our students, they come in via transfers or via change of degree objectives within the institution, which is where Will and Adam came from. And every year we see strong demand from both. And so some students take a little bit longer to figure out maybe computer science isn't quite right for them, or engineering isn't quite right for them, or other areas on campus. Some of you come in knowing maybe that you want to pursue UX design, but you might perhaps not know exactly why yet. And so that's one of the things that we try to address in the first Learning Studio experience, which starts in spring of your first year. So one of the questions that we get most frequently when we're talking to prospective students and to prospective codos within the institution is what it's like being a UX design student. And so if you could maybe share what it's like to be in that Learning Studio and Experience Studio environment, and maybe contrast it with some of the other learning experiences that you've had.
So I'm in the first Learning Studio, and it's a very small class. How many students do we have in that class? 35. So it's not like a big lecture hall. It's a lot of group work, which I really enjoy, and if that's something you don't particularly enjoy, it's something that you can work on. Knowing that we're all in the same major, it really helps. It really ensures that everybody's kind of on the same page. A lot of the time you're in a group, in a class, and nobody's really focused or motivated. But in UX, it's completely different from previous groups that I've been in. We're all interested in the same thing, and we just achieve this goal-oriented mindset that's very different than anything I've experienced. But yeah, a lot of group work. I've mentioned this in the past. This just one semester of UX, I've learned an incredible amount. It's unbelievable. Maybe it's the way it's structured. Maybe it's just the group I'm in, but it's quite amazing.
It's only week 12. You still have 4 more weeks to go.
Oh my gosh. Wow, time flies. So I guess, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah, sure. So yeah, to elaborate a little bit on what he mentioned, it's definitely a lot of group work, but it's not like other classes where a lot of times you'll end up doing a lot of the work or feeling like there's a disproportionate amount of work being done. Everyone puts a lot of passion and effort into the projects, and they're projects you actually enjoy. A lot of our work involves choosing problem space you're interested in, something you actually want to work on, and you kind of get to apply the skills that you want to develop. Like, for example, I have classmates who are really interested in visual design, so they tend to work on those aspects more, or user research. They'll take charge of creating testing protocols and leading testing. So it's a lot of self-paced development. And to kind of mention what Austin was talking about earlier, you really get what you put into it.
So Adam briefly touched on, I guess, more of the learning studio side. So I enjoy the learning studios a lot, but again, there are also experience studios. And so seeing the learning studios, it's interesting because all of us are in the same year of UX. So we have generally, at least in the first year, the same level of understanding of UX and the methods that come with it. Whereas the experience studio, on the other hand, you're in there with everyone in the major. So you have people with different skill levels, different understandings of things, different perspectives. And in those experience studios, I particularly like the fact that you can take certain things that people offer and add those to your toolbox to use in the learning studio and to use in the experience studio as well, to kind of build your knowledge on UX. And even though you're both working in teams in the learning studio and experience studio, there are definitely different experiences with teams, but they're both amazing.
This is when we need a whiteboard.
Yeah.
So we've thrown around the terms like learning studio, experience studio.
I was gonna,
Should we maybe go into that?
Yeah, we should perhaps define those, because
Yes.
that's one of the sort of trickiest things in labeling. And if you look on the website, you'll see there are all these required courses you have to take. There are 8 UX studios that you will have to take. There are 5 what we call learning studios, and then there are 3 what we call experience studios. What is difficult to convey, I think, is the interplay between those studios every semester. So what we've designed within the curriculum is 5 continuous semesters of experiences that we've designed for you to develop your skills as a UX designer. They start in the 2nd semester of your freshman year, and they continue through the end of your junior year. And our goal through those experiences is to really spiral your development and growth as a designer, to learn new skills every semester, but to really create a solid foundation in the first semester that you can then deepen and broaden every semester in very specific kinds of ways. And we do that through these 2 kinds of studios. The learning studios, as we affectionately call them, are studios 1 through 5, UXD Studio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those are our cohort-specific learning studios. So you'll be placed in a cohort when you admit into the program. This year it's about 35 students that we have in the cohort. That number is growing steadily. And the learning experiences are really designed for that studio around imagining your most hectic week of work ever. And so thinking about what are all the skills that you need when you have to just be on, and you have to produce, and you have to create awesome materials. And how can we make things as difficult as possible on you, but in very engineered and very specific ways, so that you can learn what strategies are successful and which strategies that have worked in the past really well for you that suddenly don't work well anymore. And so those are authentic projects that are designed in a very specific sequence. Those are followed up with 4 additional studios, which I can talk about a little bit later. Every semester, you're also enrolled in an experience studio. And experience studio is a little bit of a special place because it is a cross-listed course where freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in UX are all in the same classroom. So this semester, it's about 75 students. By the time you might arrive next year, we'll have about 100 students in experience studio. And you'll get assigned to a real industry project led by an industry sponsor, and you'll get assigned to a team for an entire semester. And that team will be comprised of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. There's a lot of opportunity for mentoring and for development and growth. There's also an opportunity for, as soon as you learn a skill in Learning Studio, that you're able to apply it in your Experience Studio project, or maybe vice versa. You'll need a skill for your Experience Studio project depending on the scope the industry sponsor has set out. And you're able to use that and infuse it back into your Learning Studio experience. And it's really exciting when we see that learning transfer happening in each direction. So our goal is, through these 2 parallel studio experiences every semester for 5 semesters, is to really build and spiral your growth as a designer. And as a bonus, by the time you finish that sequence, typically by the end of your junior year, you already have 2.5 years of real work experience working for 5 different industry clients. So by the time you go out for an internship or a job, you'll have a pretty clear idea about what kinds of companies you might want to work for, what kinds of teams you value, and what kinds of cultures of work that you might value as well. Is that clear enough?
You nailed it.
Okay, good. Okay, so we know a little bit about the studios now. We're going to keep on talking. Tell them all the things they need to know about UX. So what are some of the things that you've learned about yourself since starting in the program?
Oh boy.
I can start. So I think one of the biggest areas of growth for me was learning the value of reflection and kind of self-assessing. So we do these weekly reflections every week where we talk about how we've grown in the week, how we're feeling about not only what we're doing in class, but just our life in general. And it's really taught me to kind of take an inward look and think about my projects on a critical level, and how I'm doing and how that may be impacting my work.
For me, I guess in high school, my experience with the group projects, a lot of that was me kind of stepping up and guiding the group and helping the group, get to the end of the project, learning things along the way. And one area for growth for me in UX was kind of stepping down from that leadership role and letting others take it on, because it's a challenge, first of all, because you don't want anything to go wrong. You don't want to forget anything. You want to guide the group how you envision it and reach the end in the way you envision it. So it's really hard to step down from that leadership role, but through that I've learned the value of getting multiple perspectives and letting people take that next step, even if it's difficult for them. So it's been a challenge for me to step down again from that leadership role, but it's been worth it, not only for me but for my classmates, for my teammates, because they've been able to grow as well with me.
Right now I'm taking a class, not this one, for collaborative leadership. They actually offer a collaborative leadership certificate here, so that's what I'm shooting for. And that class, in addition to the studios, have helped me grow some leadership skills. I don't usually take a really big leadership role like I have with these projects, but kind of stepping outside of my comfort zone and learning how to time manage, learning how to resolve conflicts, work well with people that you initially hadn't at the beginning of the projects. It's really amazing how close you and the rest of your team members can become from beginning to end. Just kind of, I guess one big takeaway for me is just stick with it until the end, because you never know how it's going to turn out. Trust your instincts and hope for the best.
So you talked a little bit about this other course and certificate that you were engaged in. All three of you are in slightly different paths. And so maybe talk a little bit about the way that the other coursework outside of the UX studios has informed your sort of goals and how it's enriched your experience, whether it be a minor, whether it be a course, whether it be a certificate program.
I guess for me, I'm in the Certificate in Entrepreneurship program, which is an amazing program here. It's growing every year, and I knew coming into college that was something I wanted to do because I heard really good things about it. And something that I've received or done a lot of in the certificate program, especially in the first couple entrepreneurship classes, is group work. A lot of students I've seen as they come into UX, they're very they're afraid to get up and present. They're afraid to even just speak up in class and answer a question. But something that I've learned in my entrepreneurship classes was kind of getting more comfortable presenting, getting more comfortable in front of a crowd and being confident up there, having a smile on your face, powerful voice. So a lot of those presenting skills I've gotten from my entrepreneurship classes, because we do a lot of group work in there, and then we do several presentations throughout the semester. So I've gotten a lot of practice with it, and I recommend it to whoever.
So I'm minoring in both psychology and management, and for psychology I've been able to use a lot of the different principles in all of these different sorts of classes I've been taking. Like I took a clinical psychology class, and that's kind of influencing some of the project work I'm doing right now. And in management, I'm learning about corporate cultures and how to negotiate that, and a lot of different things that go into the structure of a company. And as a designer, you're going to end up having to both balance what you're trying to do in your design work and what the stakeholders in the company want, and that is becoming increasingly important. And I feel like the skills I've been learning in management have kind of helped me navigate that as well.
So in addition to that collaborative leadership certificate, I'm taking 2 minors, or I'm shooting for 2 minors. Spanish, and which isn't really related to UX. It can be, yes, definitely. And psychology, as Rhea mentioned. And psychology has kind of opened my eyes to many things that I hadn't really known. Kind of learning how users think, how they interact with other people and like screens. That's just really interesting to me. I never really had a huge interest in like that type of science before or study, so that's really interesting. And going back to the collaborative leadership certificate, has definitely helped me pick up a few really big concepts such as communication, obviously leadership, organization, empathy is a big one, definitely. But yeah, it's always great to immerse yourself in different studies, because you never know what you can pull out and use in your current major or your future.
So Rhea said something that I think people might want to hear a little bit more about, which is you were mentioning how you're able to draw on some stuff from your background in some of your projects, and especially in some of the later studios, these projects are really open-ended, and sometimes you have to define the problem space at the beginning. Do you want to talk about some examples of where you've had sort of free reign but have needed to scope down really quickly?
Yeah, definitely. So that's something I'm working on right now. So I'm in the 5th studio in the sequence of learning studio. So in this class we work on a specialization project where we define what we want to work on, and this can relate to who we want to focus on, the context, any technologies. So in the beginning of the semester I had a very broad and open scope. It was voice technology because I really wanted to work with voice technology and the medical space and a doctor-patient visit. And obviously there's so many ways you can go with that, but over the process I've found that that's not something I could tackle in just one semester, and I've had to scope down into smaller problems. Like I scoped down to focusing on preventative mental health based on some interviews I did, and hearing people talk about mental health and being aware of needing to take action but not really knowing how to approach that or having support systems in place. And I've most recently scoped down to loneliness and how loneliness is affected by the transition from being a college student to going into the job market. So very different from doctor, patient, and voice.
So we haven't heard a lot from Austin yet, so I'd like to give you a chance to maybe talk a little bit more about the studios that you teach and some of the things you like to really see that translate into student success in those studios.
Okay, sure. So I teach the 3rd and 4th studios, so if you're starting next spring, it'll be a while before you take one of my classes. But I focus a lot on having sort of open-ended projects that require a lot of problem shaping, problem definition in the beginning. And what I usually look for there, which is, Will and Adam should close their ears because it's not that much of a secret. What I'm usually looking for there are people to be able to make quick decisions. Ultimately, a lot of these projects, what we're interested in by the end of the project, we're interested in learning what your process was, how did you rationalize the design decisions you made, and not just the design decisions you made, but how did you justify the methods you took to get to those design decisions. And so ultimately, the context, while it impacts the kind of thing that gets designed in a really big way, the context is not as important to me when I'm teaching these studios. I'm more interested in the process and the decisions and the rationale and the justification. So it's always really funny to me when students working in a group will spend 2 of their 4 weeks deciding what they want their context to be, what do they think they're going to design, where I think those decisions could maybe be made in the first hour of the project. And then you pick one and you sort of stick with it, and then you give yourself that as a constraint and you work on your design justifications and your rationales based on that constraint. And we tell students this every year, and it's a hard skill to learn. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice, and so I don't fault anyone for spending half of their first project in my class defining their context, and then ultimately coming to me on like the fourth studio day and saying, okay, we think we found our problem scope, and then I'm not very impressed usually at that point. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. What kind of research have you done yet? But that's a good skill to learn, and it takes practice, and we understand that takes practice. Do you want me to talk a little bit more about the specific studios, or do you want to go through them in order?
Yeah, we can go through the studios in order.
Yeah.
You can correct us if we get anything wrong. You're the ones that have
No.
experienced it. Let's go.
Yes.
So there are 5 studios in sequence, and Will and Adam are both in Studio 1 right now, almost all the way through. In Studio 1 we call our fundamentals studio, because really you're learning a foundation of skills in that studio that are going to serve as the platform through which to develop all the other skills you'll need as a UX designer. You do your first project in the second and third week of school, and it is intense. It is a completely group-based experience your first semester, and our goal is to expose you to the entire life cycle of UX work in that first 2-week project. You fail miserably. It's wonderful, because then you get all those bad ideas out of the way and you're able to actually find a renewed process that works for you. So the first semester, it's really about exposing you to these core components of doing UX work. We roughly divide these across the curriculum into 3 areas: user research, framing the problem, understanding who the user is and how they function, how they make meaning in the world, that kind of thing. The second main area is prototyping, and this could be prototyping as simple as a napkin sketch, could be as complex as a fully working programmed prototype, or anything in between, as long as it's bringing value and understanding the problem space and the desired outcomes a little bit better. And then the final area is this idea of evaluation and testing. We're not just testing to make sure the thing works. That's usability. We do that. But we're also looking at, is it actually solving the problem we set out to solve? Is it engaging with the problem space in a meaningful way? Is it bringing about positive social change? And it's really the intersection of all 3 of those skill sets that we're seeking to develop across the entire curriculum. You'll get a few tools in each area in your toolbox in the first semester, and then every semester from there on out, you'll develop additional skills that are going to deepen and broaden your abilities in each one of those areas. So the first semester is really about exploring that space, understanding that design is not problem solving, understanding that design is inherently collaborative, and it often means that you're going to have to resolve tensions with people who think differently than you, and really laying the groundwork for positive teamwork. In further semesters, we engage in all the same activities, but those just become a given, and you're going to learn new skills that are going to deepen things even further. So I teach Studio 1.
Can I interrupt before you go into Studio 2? So one of the things that you were mentioning about the very first project is that most of the students end up failing that project. But I wanted to clarify that it doesn't end up resulting in most of the students failing the studio or the semester.
Yeah.
We do not have weed out classes in the UX major. And so the focus, when we talk about failing, we talk about being able to learn from your mistakes and being able to turn failures into positive learning experiences.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of failure at the beginning of Studio 1, but it does not result in students failing the semester or ultimately having their GPAs tanked or anything like that.
Yeah.
That is not the focus of our program. Our program is very supportive and very productive and collaborative in that way. So we use failure as a tool in that sense, but it's not to like kick people out of the program in any way.
That's a great point.
Yes.
You guys haven't really experienced the outcomes yet, but maybe Rhea, could you talk to your experience and the experience of your cohort and sort of working through what we call productive failure?
Yeah, definitely. So I remember when we got back our first project and we saw the grade and we were just so shaken by how bad we did. And it was just kind of that moment where it was like, oh, is this whole class going to be like this? But you gradually, over time, you get to, like you were saying, you need to learn from what you did wrong and apply it back. And that's how you build upon your learning experience and grow from it. Like, I can look back on projects now and say, because of how reflective I was at this time, because of the feedback I got from that project, I can understand what I did wrong in that and how to be better and be a better practitioner now.
Great. So one of the core issues that is sort of built into our educational system, particularly in the United States, is this idea that there should be a right answer to everything. And it's one of the core issues in design, that if you can't get past this idea that there's a right answer, then you're constantly going to be frustrated. And so this is why we build productive failure in the program, because it's really not about the outcome as much as it's about the process and the way that you got there. Because every time you engage in design, it's going to be a different process in a different space. And so we really try to build students' mastery around dealing with complexity and uncertainty. And part of that is often engaging in this idea of failure. There's lots of support to make it all happen, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit after we talk about the studios a little bit more.
I do also want to say that something that Colin he said it actually a few weeks ago in class, or a month ago, was that there is no better time to fail than right now, as you are students, because when you get into the industry, you probably you want to have those that knowledge and that mindset that you can get past that failure, rather than experiencing failure for the first time then. So it's okay to fail. Don't try to fail, obviously, but be okay with it, and then take things from it and work on those. It's a big part too.
Great. So let's dig into the other studios a little bit more briefly. So I really gave you the setup in Studio 1. The rest of our sequence is really modeled after that same sort of learning by doing experience, trying to engage you in new methods, new skills that are going to further your success. So I teach the first and second studio, so I get students for their first year of the program, and they're also taking Experience Studio with Professor Nancy Rashi. And then Austin and Paul, our colleagues, pick them up in Studios 3, 4, and then I normally come back and join for 5 again. And so the first thing that I want to talk about with Studio 2 is that it really is an extension of all those skills that you've already learned. We start to theme the studios a little bit more, though. So we move from low fidelity work, or really paper and pencil, pen and whiteboards in the first semester, to using digital prototypes in the second semester. And there's some very specific reasons why we do things in the way that we do. But in the second semester, we're starting to focus more on medium and high fidelity work. So we're engaging in a broad range of skills and concepts that are especially helpful in engaging with visual perception. So ideas about Gestalt psychology, thinking about visual principles from a graphic design perspective, thinking about how people perceive visuals and make sense of them from the perspective of semiotics. All those just give you different perspectives on why visuals work, how they build easy to use and enjoyable interfaces, and what those might look like played out in a lot of different formats, from a smartphone to a website to maybe a kiosk or other size device. And so the projects in the second studio are really framed around understanding this multiplicity of different kinds of visual formats and really focusing primarily on screen-based design. We do also throw in some little extras every semester to keep things fresh and keep things interesting. In the second semester, we engage in participatory design and co-design, which is all about engaging the user in different ways in the design process, beyond just designing for them, but designing with the user. We also engage in the second semester in digital civics work, imagining how we might engage with community partners and other stakeholders to develop solutions that are not only technically correct, but they're actually meaningful for the community they're being designed for. And I'll hand it off to Austin to talk about Studio 3 and 4.
Yeah, so Studio 3 is called the cross-channel studio, and so this is mostly focused on how interactions can be designed across multiple channels or multiple devices. So if you think about the way that you can watch something on your phone and then flick it up and put it on a TV, or transfer it over to a laptop or something like that, those are multiple channels that people can interact with the same medium. Google Stadia, that was just announced, is a very good example of this kind of a thing. And so what we end up trying to design for are different channels of communication, different ways that the same kind of thing could be split across different channels seamlessly so that people aren't confused and can move between them. We focus a lot on prototyping in that cross-channel studio, because it's really difficult to understand how can you prototype multiple channels, and how can you do it in a way that's easy enough to access that it didn't take you a whole semester to build your prototype. We want prototypes that are fast, that answer our questions quickly and efficiently, and that we can move on from ultimately. Prototypes should help answer questions that you have about your design rationale, and they shouldn't do much more than that in our studios. So that ends up being a lot of what we focus on for that particular studio. Currently, we use Arduinos in the first half of the studio, and as a way to get students more comfortable with some of the technical side of prototyping. And then in the second half of that studio, we do some emerging technologies. So right now, I have students that are working on haptics projects. I have students that are working on augmented reality projects. Some are doing virtual reality. Some are doing voice user interface stuff. That second half of that studio is really open into these kinds of emerging technologies. And so I don't actually know what it'll be like 2 years from now when you all might be taking it, because what it means for something to be an emerging technology will be different at that point in time. Then for the fourth studio, is there anything I should add about Studio 3?
Maybe describe what haptics is, because
Haptics.
somebody in high school
Okay.
might not realize what that is.
Oh, that's true, yeah. So this is actually really new to this studio. We didn't have these projects last year. We have a colleague who does a lot of work on haptics, which maybe a really easy way to explain that is like that your device is vibrating or having some sort of physical reaction rather than just digital reaction when you're interacting with them. And so we have a colleague that builds really cool haptics prototypes, and we're trying to incorporate those into some of the design projects that our students are working on. So I think we have one student team that's working on a haptics haunted house, and so it'll be like designing creepy, scary things that have new kinds of haptic technologies in them. And so it's a little bit deeper than just like the kind of buzz that your phone does. These are really sophisticated buzzes, and so they feel really interesting and realistic.
So you probably all experienced haptics without necessarily realizing it. It's what makes newer smartphones feel like they have a button when a button doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like
Or a
one
trackpad.
aspect, or a trackpad on some laptops. But this is a whole new unexplored space to imagine how might we communicate without words, just communicate with feelings or with vibratory sensations. And so this is, I think, an exciting new direction for UX, and it's one of the reasons that we plug it into the third studio.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. And then so for Studio 4, it's called the Strategy Studio, basically. And so it is focused on how do you communicate with potential companies that you might be working at about your value as a user experience designer, or the value of user experience design in general, or even human-computer interaction work in general, and how do you incorporate those approaches into maybe companies that haven't traditionally had that kind of an approach. We're currently in a period of time where a lot of companies know what user experience design is, or they think they know. They at least know enough that they should probably hire some user experience designers, but not every company knows what to do with them once they get there. And so what we're hoping to train some of our students in with that particular studio is how to communicate with these companies what they should be doing or what their value actually is. It's not our expectation that students, once they're done with that studio, are actually user experience strategists, because that's something that actually takes a long time in the field to develop. But this is laying the groundwork of some of the vocabulary there and some of the background information that they'll need to know to be really good user experience strategists in the future.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the core skills that we're really trying to teach in that studio is that, user experience designers do not design alone. They're always designing in concert with other people. And so it's really important to not only understand and value other disciplinary perspectives, but really to embrace them as part of our challenge as facilitating design work as UX designers. And so you can create the best design in the world. If you can't get a computer scientist to program it for you, you're not going to get very far. If you don't understand the business realities of launching a new product, even if the product is great, it might not ever fly. And so it's really about trying to connect all those pieces together to make sure that you have the most impact that you can have. And then I'll talk a little bit about Studio 5. Studio 5 is special. Rhea talked about it a little bit earlier. It's actually quite challenging for us to manage, and we're figuring out how to do it at scale. This is the second year that we'll be teaching Studio 5. Essentially, the goal is to encourage students to specialize in whatever areas of UX interest them the most. Hopefully this is directed towards their potential future career, or it might just be to play in a new space and figure out how they might operate in that area. And so we give the students a challenge in the first few weeks of the semester to essentially design their own curriculum for the semester. So we give them some help, a lot of help, but you essentially get the chance to design your own syllabus, your own set of projects and exercises, identify your own readings, to deepen your knowledge in whatever area of UX excites you the most. So Rhea talked a little bit about her experience in designing for a mental health context already. We have students that are designing for runway fashion that are designing for people with type 2 diabetes.
Is it type 2 or type 1? I thought it was type 1.
Type 1.
Oh.
Type 1. Yeah, you're right. It's been a long day. And lots and lots of other contexts. Gaming, accessibility, how people experience theme parks. So a really wide range of contexts, which is really brought to us by individual students. And then we give you the tools and the critique to help develop your concepts over the course of an entire semester. Our hope is that every student leaves the program feeling that they are a unique designer with a unique value proposition that they can bring to industry or to other third sector kinds of organizations. That we're not generating lots and lots of clones of us as faculty or of each other, but really trying to identify what makes you successful, what are the unique skills that you bring to the table, and what are the spaces in UX that you feel like you might have the most impact in. So what did we miss? Because you've seen all of the studios play out now.
Oh, good question. There was a lot you covered. Yeah, there's beyond the group work. There's also individual work that we get to engage in, and obviously the specialization is very individual focused, and it requires a lot of self-learning and kind of reflection to assess how to approach things without the support of other people. Obviously, we have the support of professors to give you feedback. They're super helpful, but at the end of the day, it is an individual effort. So it takes a different set of skills to manage both kinds of projects.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, throughout the program, there are different exercises and challenges that we engage in that are shorter and but still require individual work.
Yeah, kind of bouncing off of what Rhea said about self-learning. In the first learning studio, where we build a foundation of skills, I've had to teach myself new skills, new methods, and that's been somewhat of a challenge for me. But I think that teaching myself things is one of the best ways to learn. I think it's more effective than someone telling me how to do it, because I can actually immerse myself in the space and learn in my own way. And so I've definitely done that a few times, and I assume there's many more times ahead of me, but I definitely value these times.
Yeah, that's a great point, thinking about the value of self-learning. We're trying to address this new space where higher education is very quickly changing. And it's something that's been the mission of the Polytechnic more broadly, and thinking about how can we modernize teaching approaches. But one of the heuristics that we sort of came in with in designing this program was we didn't want to spend time teaching you things that you could already learn for free or very easily online. And we also didn't want you to spend a lot of time teaching things that have a very short shelf life. And so technology is rapidly changing. The methods that designers use is rapidly changing, and the technological tools that they use to create prototypes and other things is rapidly changing. And so we are much more focused on all of you developing the skills to self-learn throughout your entire career, because that's going to be much more beneficial than learning this tool that is not being used even by the time you graduate. And so we've tried to carefully calibrate the program to make sure that you have the technical skills to get an internship this summer, you have the technical skills to get, and theoretical skills to actually take a job 2 or 3 years from now, and that 10 years from now that you have the theoretical backbone that when everything has changed about the industry in which you work, that you're still going to be capable designers. That requires a lot of work on your part. It also requires a lot of work on our part, but that's something that we're constantly trying to calibrate to make sure that we're getting the right mix.
Definitely learning how to learn and learning how to adapt is really important. I found that in my internships that those skills have been what carried me forward, because wherever you work, what you work on is going to be different, but those skills will never go away.
So one other main point that I want to highlight that we haven't talked about a lot yet is this idea of a learning community. It's one of the things that, when we talk about you designing user experiences, we as faculty have gotten the chance to design your experience. And one of the core fundamental things that we started out with was this idea that we did not want this to be a competitive environment, and we wanted this to feel like a nurturing, safe space to fail, to practice, to to succeed, and to feel like you have people that have your back. So we have our notions about what we hope has been designed into the program. But could you maybe talk from a student perspective about what the UX community looks and feels like?
Loaded question. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can just say right off the bat that we're just a big family, and big, I mean, small, close-knit. It's a lot different than all the other majors, primarily because of the size, but also just the way that it was created brings together a lot of students in many different ways, not just within the program, but also out of the program. There is the User Experience Design Club, which maybe Rhea will touch on later, but all these modes of meeting new people, working with other people, collaborating with other people, learning from other people, really brings you together. And that's not something that I've seen too much of in my other classes. So it's really nice to be in an environment where I feel like I'm at home, and I feel like there's a support system constantly surrounding me. I can go to people for help, whether that's the faculty, whether that's the students. So it's just been an amazing experience. And again, just knowing that everyone's there, just to talk to go to lunch with, to do homework with, to work on a project with, it's really, really relieving.
Yeah, definitely from when I came into the program and to where I am now, I've definitely felt that supportive environment, community environment. I remember coming in and just looking at these projects and thinking, like, how am I even going to approach this and navigate all this complexity, and having the support of the upperclassmen to ask constant questions and ask them how they navigated the space and talk to me about their experiences, and being able to do that now and mentor other students, whether it's through feedback or just kind of helping them navigate everyday college life too.
Yeah, definitely a big part of the support system here in UX is mentoring, which I don't think we've touched on much, but I'll kind of go over that briefly. We're given, at the start of the program, we're given a faculty mentor and a student mentor, both of which I've definitely reached out to and utilized. Austin here is my faculty mentor, so, and then my student mentor, I've reached out for a bunch of my projects at moments of confusion, hesitation, or just to kind of hang out with and grab coffee. So it's definitely a family in that respect, and we do kind of meet up and socialize outside of the program, which is always nice, so I don't have to look at these people as just simply instructors or professors. I can actually see them for who they are as real people, so that's always nice. And yeah, it's great.
It's definitely something that's very unique about the UX program, and it's not something that I would have even thought to ask about, because it's, you kind of live it and then you don't realize how much of an integral experience it is, and how essential it is to your growth.
So for those of you watching, either time delayed or in real time, if you do accept your offer at Purdue, as soon as we get your names, which will be in early May, we will assign peer mentors and faculty mentors to each and every student. And we encourage our students to engage those as quickly as they possibly can. Those are resources. Those are not cheats or get out of jail free cards, but they're truly a way to enrich your experience as a UX designer. We put a lot of time from a faculty perspective into our mentees. We try to engage both socially and professionally with all the students that were assigned. And the peer mentors also take this very seriously. So we ask for volunteers every year, and typically about 2/3 of our students respond saying yes, they're willing to be a peer mentor, and those are the peer mentors that get assigned out to the next cohort. And those are people that you can track through 3 years of your college experience, because they're just 1 year ahead of you. So you can see their successes, and you can imagine yourself in their shoes, and then you'll be prepared when the moment comes to get your own internship, your own job, or to give critique to the next cohort of students as they come in as well. So we try to build this community, because ultimately, when you get done and you graduate successfully, these are going to be your professional network for the rest of your career, or at least part of your professional network for the rest of your career. And so we really believe that we're kickstarting that lifelong relationship rather than just something that's very short-lived on Purdue's campus. So I think we've given a pretty decent overview of the program. I think we'll probably start to wind down. I see we do have a few people online. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer them if we can. But while they consider their potential questions, Are there any things that you wished that you had known as a senior in high school about your sort of career aspirations, about whether this might be the right fit, that you might be able to share with somebody who's watching?
It's hard to look back.
Yeah, right.
So long ago for me.
Something small just for me is, I honestly wish I knew about UX earlier. I don't regret not knowing about it, but if I had known about it at the beginning of college, knowing at least that I wanted to pursue it, I would have had more time in the program, because for me, my program is going to be condensed down to 3 years rather than 4 years, because I had that year in exploratory studies, which is completely fine. But I love UX and I want to spend as much time as I can in it. There's so many great resources here, so I honestly wish I knew that UX design was for me earlier.
To be fair, though, you got a whole year of mentee dinners
Yes.
without
Oh,
you.
yes. Yes. So that's a plus.
Yeah, I think I would have said to my high school self, trust your judgment, because as I mentioned earlier, I was super excited looking at the curriculum and thinking about the classes I would be in. But what I didn't mention is I tried to double major in computer science. And while the computer science program here is great, I realized that it wasn't the right fit for me personally. And if I had realized that earlier, I wouldn't have expected so much of myself in trying to manage that. And you really need to trust yourself to know what's right for you.
I also just want to mention something. So I was contemplating minoring in computer science because I thought it would, accompany UX design very well. But again, like she said, the computer science program here at Purdue is amazing, but it is not exactly what I was looking for in computer science. So another thing that I wish I knew was, I guess, the value of talking to people, because I had talked to one of the current students at the time last year, and he had actually done a minor in computer science. So just talking to him and going to lunch with him for just an hour made me kind of shift my path to a better direction. So coming to Purdue right away, just start talking to people if you're confused, because I did that and it like changed my path just a little bit, but it made a huge difference.
Yeah, a couple things for me. If you're a high school student, definitely do your research early. So for me, I kind of waited like to the middle of my first year because I was in exploratory. I went on the Purdue website and I read through every single major that I thought I was interested in. And going off of that, choose something that aligns with your interests and what you've been doing growing up and what you see yourself doing in the future. For me, as I said, I've always been tech savvy, so I knew something in the design world or creative world would be for me. So definitely do your research on those parts there.
So we do have a couple of questions from Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
So one question is, are there any UX design specific study abroad opportunities? And the enthusiastic answer is yes. Maria, would you like to share your experience doing a UX study abroad?
Such a great experience. I had so much fun. So I went last May to Newcastle and Edinburgh, and
Newcastle upon Tyne in England.
yes, not in the Newcastle here. Much more exciting.
Not nearly as glamorous.
It was about, I think, almost 3 weeks. It was a really great time because we were involved in a project while we were there, and it was such a great experience to work with people doing community-based design and digital civics, and getting their perspective from researchers who really work in that space a lot. But not only that, it was just so fun to be in a different culture and travel and vacation with your friends for a few weeks and just see the country from a different perspective, because we engaged in a lot of reflection while we were there, and thinking about how England, even though speak the same language, may share similar customs, can be defamiliarized and feel different.
Yeah.
You want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Colin and I run that study abroad program, and we wrote an article about it in Interactions magazine that you can find.
It was just shared on the Computer Graphics Technology
Oh.
Facebook page if you want to check it out.
You might even be able to find it if you Google Purdue User Experience Study Abroad, but I don't know how much
Yeah.
more specific you might have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're happy to link you up to that. We're about to run the second iteration of that study abroad this May. It is open to anyone on campus, but practically speaking, the UX design students find all the slots. So we took 13 last year. We're taking 16 this year. 4 of them are graduate students, the other 12 are undergrads. So it's something that Austin and I are very passionate about, doing
Yeah.
work that is in the service of the local community, seeing users not as just people that we collect data from, but users as citizens that have a stake in their own the services that support them and their local governments,
Yeah.
and then thinking about the way that might impact user experience work more broadly.
Yeah, and our plan is to continue doing those for as long as they seem productive. And we've been going specifically to Newcastle upon Tyne because that's where Newcastle University is, and that's where a lab called Open Lab is, where they focus on digital civics research and digital civics work that does a lot of outreach with their local community. And they're a really nice example of how to do that kind of research and how to tie those community engagements into one's design work or one's research. And so we're going to continue going there for as long as we can, I think.
Yeah, so it's a world-class lab. They're one of the most prestigious human-computer interaction labs in the world. Austin and I both worked there as visiting researchers, and Austin was previously a postdoc there as well. He did research. And so it's an area of England that we know very well, and we love to bring students over there to experience a different culture, a different space, and also engage in different kinds of design work. So Laura also had a second question, which I think I can take on, which is how are co-ops incorporated into the major, and are most co-ops within the Purdue area? So the Polytechnic at large has a great history of engaging in co-op experiences, allowing students to get credit for authentic work experiences. This is still a relatively new area for UX design, though. So we have had some industry sponsors contact us about potentially engaging in co-ops in the future. Because of the structure of our studios, it makes it very difficult for us to sub out things during the semester. And so the most promising opportunities for co-ops would probably be to engage in it as a summer internship style co-op. And most of our students do engage in internships, sometimes for credit already. Co-ops are still an area we're exploring a little bit more, though. I do anticipate that in the future there might be more opportunities for semester-long co-ops within the local area, but it's something that's still relatively new for us. I'd be happy to talk offline if you want to send an email, though, about what some of those opportunities might look like.
We have a cheat question.
We have a cheat question, which I'd love for the students to answer. So Paul, our colleague, who's joining us remotely from California, asks, do you recommend any books for students to read before joining the program?
Ooh, before joining. So I read a short book by Ellen Lupton that I read it a few semesters in, but I felt like it would be a great introduction into design, and it's called Design as Storytelling, and it kind of previews kind of the work we do and how to approach thinking about design in a really visual and entertaining format.
If you want like a good, brief summary of some of the methods we use in UX, definitely UMOD, so the Universal Methods of Design. Not sure who the author is.
I love how you're already referring to it by the letters. That's a sign of a true UX nerd.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yes, of course.
One of the best.
So yeah, it's been one of my favorite books. Yeah.
I love it, and I still use it, and I recommend it to my colleagues all the time.
There's a nice little pocket-sized version too,
Oh, yeah.
which is really adorable.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anything else from you?
A lot of the books we read in class, they're built into the curriculum already. I don't know if you need to read them ahead of time, but I've done this like once or twice. I've gone to Colin and just kind of asked. You're probably not going to be able to, but ask around and see if you're here on campus. You can ask what books are available because they have a good selection. But if you're not on campus, get online and I guess look up things about UX that it may be beneficial, may not. You might want to touch on looking things up.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen certain YouTube videos where you have kind of like a day in the life of a UX designer, or maybe just a video of, I think there was actually a video that I saw the other day on by Google where they had some UX designers, I just watched yesterday, that I found to be very informational, kind of the process that they go through. So not just books, but also videos tend to help me pretty well.
Something else, kind of to see a little bit more of the process behind a UX designer, look up some portfolios and definitely look at some of those case studies and projects that you can find online. So that's pretty great.
Yeah.
And podcasts are a great way to hear about what's happening in industry and how people are engaging with design work in their companies.
Yeah, I listen to a couple podcasts just on the airplane. Before even coming to Purdue, I found some nice podcasts just on my iPhone and listened to a couple of those, and they were very relevant to what's going on now, and you get to see some good perspectives. I can't name them right off the top of my head, but look around for podcasts. They're very, very interesting.
That's great. So, I mean, one of the underlying messages here is that, learning never stops. And so definitely kickstart your learning before you even come to Purdue. Stay curious. Find things that interest you and maybe start to understand why they're so interesting to you. That's fuel that you can bring with you. And then we can help you construct a more meaningful learning experience around those materials. Also know that you don't have to wait to start in your first studio for UX magic to start to happen. There's the Purdue UX Student Club that you can engage with as soon as you get on campus.
That's relevant to the question that
Yep.
was popping too.
And there's also a Purdue Slack workspace that every student is added to as soon as they get admitted. That is your conduit to talk to any student that's in the major, grad or undergrad, and alumni that have graduated from the program as well. It's a wonderful resource to get questions answered, and to what you were talking about earlier about asking good questions and talking to people and realizing that there are lots of resources. We're happy to be resources. The students in the program are incredibly gracious with their time, just like you are being tonight, in helping to share information as well. So it's a great opportunity. So Laura also asks, visiting campus soon, is there anything that you recommend that I do or people that I should talk to in the UX design department? Number one, if you haven't done so already, please send me an email, and I'm happy to coordinate your visit and link you up with some of the students and some of the other faculty. That's one of the most exciting things I get to do during my week is talk to prospective students and parents about the program, and so definitely get in touch. We would welcome you to visit classes. Our learning studios this semester are on Tuesday and Thursday, and our experience studios are on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So depending on which day you're here, we'd really invite you to join class, see what that experience is like, and then I'd be happy to organize a lunch or a coffee with some of the students so that you can get some more specific questions answered. We love engaging in that kind of way. We love food.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's shared by pretty much
That's a big
anybody in
one.
UX.
Yeah.
So that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd just remind you is that it's never too early to use these resources. So use Slack as soon as you're enrolled, and use the resources in building up towards your first learning studio in the fall. Know that there are lots of people that have your back and are really interested in helping you. It's not a duty for us. It's something that we really truly enjoy. So, any parting words that you'd like to share?
Well, going back to the visiting class thing, we've had students come into our experience studio, and they can see like exactly what we're doing, and kind of get a preview into the things that they'll be doing, and they're there they'll ask questions, we'll answer their questions, and they can see right in front of them kind of how we work, what our style of learning is, everything down to like kind of do we split into groups when we do certain things? Do we all hover in front of a whiteboard and work on things together? So coming to the classes, I would highly recommend. It's not strange or anything, like it happens, and we encourage it, like Colin was saying. So if you're on campus, I would definitely encourage coming to at least one of our classes.
Don't hesitate to reach out. All of us are super friendly, and if we don't know the answer to your question, we can always direct you to someone who does, and we seriously love talking about the program.
Yeah, user experience design is a really complex space, so doing a little research beforehand is always a smart idea, just to familiarize yourself. For myself and Will, we attended a UX design boot camp this summer. When was that? Like last summer or the summer
It
before.
made a big impression.
In Chicago, a boot camp in Chicago, and we got a really good preview of UX design. So if you can take on any of those opportunities, that would definitely help you out.
So many great online resources, lots of different perspectives on what UX is and where you might fit into it. So explore the resources, and then we'll help hopefully further your experiences in those spaces. So I think we're going to go ahead and call this to a close. We really appreciate any of you that might have joined us tonight. A reminder that you're welcome to reach out even if you're viewing an archived version of this video. You can email us at uxdesign@purdue.edu. That email goes directly to me, and I'm more than happy to connect you with students that are currently in the program, talk a little bit more about questions that you might have, or link you up with our other faculty or advising staff to answer your questions. Thank you so much, and have a good evening. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.